Hello and welcome back to the Black Dad Brand. I'm your host, Jamil Pugh, and today we got Andre Jordan coming in with us today to talk about mentoring, a topic that I absolutely love and think is an incredible importance to our community. And so Dre's gonna, really tap into this, and we'll have a robust discussion. But just want to remind you that the Black Dad Brand is about parenting style, reproductive health, career and finance, and relationship and communication. So you'll find so many different resources on our website. Check out our social media, sign up for our email campaigns where you'll find more and more content that's helping you, Black fathers, and allowing your families or helping your families to thrive. And so, with that being said, Andre, take us away and tell us about this men touring topic that you got here.
Absolutely. And again, I thank you so much, Jamil, for inviting me to this platform. I think it's an amazing movement that you have in the works. And so today, similar to like what you just mentioned, mentoring is a very critical experience that many men like you and myself have had over the years. And today I just really want to talk through kind of what mentoring is and kind of define that. And then also looking at some of the benefits and the functioning aspects of mentoring. And if you want to, you can click to the next slide. I'm just going through the agenda here. And then there's something that I like that's called applied mentoring, which essentially is just a matter of like when you take things from a conceptual standpoint and put it into day-to-day actionable practice, what does that look like? And then from there, just really segmenting over to, mentoring from the Black men's perspective and why that's important. As we talk about, supporting Black men and fathers and their families, I think that's a really interesting conversation that needs to be spoken more of. And hopefully today would just be a small snippet of that narrative to help kind of push the conversation forward. And then lastly, ending with just some resources based upon what I'm presenting today, some other local as well as international initiatives regarding mentoring specifically for Black men. So going on to the next slide, mentoring defined, right? So there's so many different clinical definitions for mentoring. There's some theoretical debate as to what mentoring truly is and kind of the dynamics of it. And I just really wanted to break it down to the four basic elements that I've seen throughout my studies and independent experiences. So one is just kind of this transference of knowledge, skills, and experience, typically from someone who is experienced, has gone through life. That doesn't necessarily mean older necessarily, but sometimes there's an associated correlation there. And then it's used to help someone who is of a lesser experience. And there's a desire that that person who is of lesser experience wanting to learn, want to expand their skills. And then the objective, in my opinion, in my experience, has always been probably one of the more critical aspects of mentoring. Like, what are you getting out of mentorship? Or if you're on the other side of the equation, being the mentor, what are you putting into it? What is your invested goal? And making sure that you're empowering the person that is seeking the knowledge, wisdom, skill to push towards progress, whatever that may be, their goals, their ambitions, the things that are going to help them become a better version of themselves. Jamil and I have both been athletes for the vast majority of our adult lives. And he could probably attest to the fact that he probably wouldn't have made it as far as he has in his collegiate as well as professional career as an athlete had it not been for mentorship. And that's on and off the court. And so when we look at the dynamics of Black men in particular, there are very specific cultural and community related elements to mentorship that is based in our essential survival skills. And so I think that as we continue the conversation about mentorship, we need to keep that at the forefront of our mind. Mentorship for the Black man is not just merely an experience where you're gaining information, sharing knowledge, and the dynamic between the mentor and mentee. This is a necessary component for our survival. And that is in every aspect of the word. Okay. And you can click over to the next slide here. So the functions and the benefits of mentoring. As I stated at the very beginning, there are so many different aspects of mentoring that has been talked about for centuries now. And when I say centuries, I literally mean that. You can look all the way back to the Bible, to Christ's arrival, to what mentorship looks like, all the way to today's latest initiatives with programs. You have statewide programs, you have international organizations that are focused primarily on mentorship, and that is the grooming and the cultivation of a disciple, someone who is seeking to learn and to understand something. So of all of that, I kind of pulled out the 5 core functions and benefits that I personally have experienced, but I've also seen in practice to be some of the most beneficial ones. So starting from the top, you have sponsorship, again, promoting the protege, the person who the mentor is grooming in many respects. And when you're promoting them, it's more so to connect them with a network that is beyond their current one. So we always talk about, from the books that we've read, the audiobooks that we listen to, the people that you surround yourself with will have a good influence on who you are and potentially can become. So when it comes to that sponsorship, it can look like something where your church has a local program and an elder in the church pays for a young man to go attend this said conference. That's sponsorship, because you're now infusing them in an environment to where they can be connected with others that they may not have the fortunate opportunity to do so. And again, it's that continual focus on the relationship building aspect of it. Secondly, is the coaching. As I mentioned before, from an athletics perspective, you have a particular goal in mind. You want to make it to the league. You want to make it to the team. You want to get stronger, faster, more agile. But you're not going to be able to do all this by yourself. So typically you seek out a coach who has either been in that role or has enough astute knowledge to help educate you on how to traverse from where you are to where you eventually want to end up being. So they're the ones that says, you need to lift these weights. You need to, eat these, have this type of dietary regimen to your program. And those are the things that you take into account and put into practice. Protection. When I talk about mentorship and I mention protection, sometimes it goes over people's heads. But one of the things that has served me well in not only being a mentee, but also a mentor, is providing a safe and sustainable place where you establish healthy boundaries, you set the guidelines for the interaction, and ultimately you make it a place where there's trust that is at the epicenter of that relationship. I can't tell you of the mentors that I've had, and I've had a lot over the years, where the most effective ones have been the ones that I felt most vulnerable with, but most encouraged to be vulnerable, because this was a place where I am seeking to achieve something that I have not up until that point. And they're entrusting me with their wisdom, their experience, their knowledge, that I would actually put it into action. But again, that protection is keeping that safe space, that bond. And particularly with Black men, I see that sometimes there's a deficit of that in our community, where again, we can talk about cars, clothes, girls, and the like, but when it comes to that really interpersonal, introspective dynamic, there isn't a lot of trust there, because unfortunately, many of us have come from environments where trust wasn't established, trust has been broken, and values have been violated. And so there's an immediate apprehension to connecting with other men in a more vulnerable and more intimate setting. So mentorship for me kind of peels the onion back in that sense to really expose the benefits, but also the necessary requirements for there to be a protective, safe, and sustainable environment for trust to be established. And then fourthly, challenge. If you don't have a mentor that does not challenge you, I would go as far to say that that's not a mentor. Challenge you respectfully, challenge you to where it pushes you beyond the bounds of your current cognitive thought process. Again, Jamil, you're in a doctoral program. I can only imagine the amount of brain cells that you've burned going against teachers, professors, lecturers, advisors, as they're trying to groom you for this next stage on your educational journey. They're challenging you constantly, almost to the point of frustration, I would imagine. But it's one to where it's for the betterment of your overall goal. Because it's one thing to say, I want to do X. I want to go to college. I want to get a job. I want to have a family. I want to start a business. But then there has to be some opposing force that is triggering enough to where it's going to create this momentum that is now spurred within you to push forward. So a mentor is one where they understand your limits, they understand your potential, and they know how to teeter the saw to where they can push you enough to where they don't break you, but frustrate you enough to challenge you to keep pressing forward, if that makes sense. And then lastly, exposure. And I would almost connect sponsorship and exposure interchangeably, because as I mentioned a few moments ago, sponsorship, the protege is being advocated for, connecting you with a network of individuals, teams, and resources that they previously didn't have. And that is now going to be ingrained in your psyche as the mentee, to see a world of possibility that didn't exist before. It's almost like, watching the recent Marvel movies where there's the metaverse. There's so many different dimensions that are now exposed to you, and it creates now a new pathway for you to entertain other options. So this, in essence, is, in my opinion, the five core functions and benefits of mentorship. You can go ahead to the next slide, and Jamil, feel free to chime in
Absolutely.
wherever you see fit. So we talked about the kind of the functions of it, the tenets of mentorship. Now the benefits, right? And so these two particular photos that I have here are near and dear to me. The one in the upper right is the current boss man for the United States Air Force, General Brown. And I've had the pleasure of actually speaking with him, interviewing him when I was deployed a few years ago. And it was one of the most amazing and insightful opportunities that I've ever had. And the mentorship was a very small 30-minute segment of my life that I'll take with me forever, because this gentleman is the first leader of the United States Air Force organization that's of African American descent. And so it's a monumental accomplishment for that matter. But then he speaks so much of his journey on how he got there, the trials and challenges that he's been able to successfully achieve and overcome. And he talks about it in the sense of mentorship. Somebody at some point throughout his journey tapped him on the shoulder, saw the potential in him, and said, I believe in you enough to where I know that if you've given the opportunity, you will excel. And even at moments where we don't succeed by definition, we still make progress. And to me, that was wonderful. And then the picture below, as we are now in the midst of graduation and commencement ceremonies, I think it's always so fitting when a Black man in particular graduates college. Because there's something that is to be said where it's easier to say, oh, I made it to college. Nowadays, we have so many supportive programs at the high school level where it's creating a more robust pipeline of diverse applicants applying to college. And Jamil, this is the groundwork that you've set there in Sacramento, where it's like,
Right.
okay, you've worked as a counselor. You have sat there and seen children develop from incoming freshmen all the way to graduating seniors with multiple acceptance letters to everything from Ivy League schools at Harvard to Berkeley to Sac State to UMass and everywhere in between, HBCUs. And so you've seen kind of that evolutionary change that they've gone through, and mentorship serves as the undercurrent that gets them from point A to point B. But then there's also the conversation of, well, when we get to college, what are those resources and mechanisms in place that allow us to sustain those unique challenges that we have as African Americans attending school, whether they be EOP programs, ways to provide additional support services from an educational standpoint, or even culturally speaking, not everyone has a fortunate opportunity to go to a historically Black college or university. So if you're going to a PWI or predominantly white institution, your experiences are going to be drastically different unless there is already a community there that kind of gives you that, and with respect, that HBCU type of experience. And I know you and I were both Sac State alum. We had that experience where it's like we had Little Africa. We had so many programs where the Cooper Woodson program. We had so many initiatives going. So, well, yes, we were at a PWI,
Or
but
the
our
new
community
or the
was
New
so
Africa House at UMass, which
exactly.
coincidentally my uncle founded 30 years before we went there. I found that out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he founded that.
Right.
So it was
And so
cool to
it's
see.
you can get that same kind of support element that you would typically see at an HBCU, because again there's a higher hyper focus on that in terms of retention and getting folks over past graduation. But again, if you don't have that in college, your experience can very well be lackluster, and we see a higher attrition rate of African American students entering into college. So to me, that picture in the lower right of the screen there means so much, because to me, it's the embodiment of survival. You've been able
Yeah.
to survive papers, quizzes, group projects. Not only that, probably the social economic challenges of making it through college, financial aid, and the like. And granted, other people experience it, but I think for the African American experience, it's very much more unique because there's a lot of support services to get you to college. Now, do
Yeah.
those match one to one to get you through to college? So when we
Right.
see these commencement ceremonies, like to me, it just pulls on the heartstrings, especially for Black men. Like, brother, I may not know you, but I can go as far to say I can probably identify with the challenges that you've endured to get to this moment now. And there's so
Yeah.
much of a celebratory cheer that happens not only for these young men, but the families that they represent. And to me,
Right.
it's still mind boggling to this day that we still have Black men who graduate college who are still the first in their family. Bro, this is 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
2023. So, as it relates to mentorship, again, this is where we're going to get here in the next couple of slides, kind of what mentorship kind of looks like. This is where you have the quintessential element of a person who has a desire and a willingness to learn, an interest to explore a world beyond what they're experiencing right now. And then you have a corresponding individual, or sometimes individuals, plural, to where they say, I see what you're trying to do, and I can see and foretell you what challenges you may encounter, but allow me to sprinkle a little bit of wisdom, education, some skill building, interpersonal relationships to help you either A, navigate around those challenges, or B, completely obliterate those challenges, or C, endure those challenges so where as you are going through what you're going through, you're able to take little nuggets of information, knowledge, and wisdom and experience to build your resiliency as you go through it. That's what mentorship, in my opinion, in my experience, has been. I would like to say, oh yeah, I've done a lot of great things in my life, and it's serving that unholy trinity of me, myself, and I. But it would be a complete lie because I've had mentors, both of my age and younger, as well as to my senior, all play a significant part in how I've been able to successfully navigate through life with the least amount of collateral damage as possible. And when I say the least amount, um, you can't be a mentor without understanding there's some sacrificial aspect of who you are that you're giving up for this mentee. And in exchange, you are, as a mentee, you are now trusted with someone else's time, their
Right.
commitment levels to then produce,
Yeah.
because what's the purpose of pouring into a pot that has a hole at the bottom? So it's really important that we understand that dynamic. So
Let me ask
to
you
the
one quick
benefits here,
question though.
oh, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So if you had to like think back, over the past 41 years, um,
Dang, you put
if
my
there's
age out there,
one,
man. Dang.
we're the same age, I'm throwing you out, but put myself out there too. But thinking back over our 41 years, bro, um, if there's one major benefit that you got from any one of your mentors, any one thing that was like super pivotal in terms of a benefit, what stands out to you?
Hmm, that's a good one. Actually, I would say right now, um, in this season of my life right now, a good mentor of mine, I don't mind name dropping him, is Dr. Ron Elmore. I have been battling, I probably maybe for the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of anxiety, a lot of questioning where I'm at in life, what is that I'm trying to do, am I where I'm supposed to be, right? And one of the things that he said to me as a mentor, mind you, he says, I feel like I have failed you. And in this conversation I had with him, I was, what do you mean you feel like you failed me? He's like, because too often mentors are trying to teach their mentees how to do things right versus teaching them how to find success even in failure. And to me, that was so groundbreaking because, and I'm just kind of being transparent here, I've recognized that I have misassociated my value with my performance. So if I'm performing at a high level, I'm good. I'm on my P's and Q's, life is going great. But in those areas where I falter, where I make critical mistakes and poor decisions, I feel like my value from a correlative standpoint diminishes almost 1 to 1, if not even more. And so he was like, as a mentor, I feel like too often the conversation is like, how do I get this great job? How do I get this house? How do I get? And reaching for this goal, even if it's by the mere of outstretched arms. And he says, we need to have a conversation of how do you succeed even in failure? Like, how do you even recognize that, man, I missed the mark. I'm not where I thought I would have been according to this curriculum of life that I've laid out. And a lot of this conversation was fused in my faith as well. It's because, there are times where there's a path that is illuminated before you, but you can't see it because your eyes are fixated on the road on the side, where there's something that's literally a yellow brick road right in front of you, but you're so focused on that goal that you set out, that vision board that you created a couple months ago, and this path isn't on that board, and you don't see it. And so because you failed to reach whatever goal you've tried to attain, you fail to recognize that even in that failure, it's a redirection or a realignment to what is truly supposed to be your assignment for this season and right now. So that to me it hit home because again, it came at a time where I thought I had checked all the boxes. I thought I'd done all the right things. And then due to poor decisions, misguided decision making, I'm like, wow, I'm really off kilter here. Like I don't even know who I'm looking at in the mirror now. And he's like, yeah, let's start talking about failures and what that actually means. And from a societal standpoint, from a black male standpoint, and just from being a disciple, being a Christian, what does that actually mean? And it was really helpful because it alleviated the burden of having to be perfect. And so I know, and what I've now coined, I said, I didn't present myself as perfect, but I was really polished. And you can polish a tarnished piece of jewelry long enough. As long as you keep buffing it, it'll shine. It may not be silver, it may be onyx, but it'll still shine. And I feel like I was polished. And that being polished gave this false sense of perfection. And again, if I'm looking to be perfect, I'm already losing from the gate. So that's probably the biggest thing that I took away from that moment of mentorship that's the most recent and probably the most impactful that I've had over the years.
Okay.
Let's see. And just quickly here on the slide, and that was a great question, by the way. Thanks.